We are always faced with different battles in life. And I firmly believe that these storms, these curveballs, whatever it is that you want to call it, is only here to test you and make you stronger. So often inside of our coaching program, we talk about the 4 pillars of success, right? That's your physical, that's your emotional, that's your mental, and that's your spiritual. And I think with the spiritual side, your faith, right, is just like a muscle. And in order for it to grow and become stronger, it needs to be tested. It needs to be, kind of put through some situations in life where it needs to grow. But in order for it to grow, hey, it needs to be stretched, right? It needs to be tested. If you guys are tuning in for the first time, welcome. My name is Coach Joe, CEO and head coach of Heartletics, and I'm really excited to be talking a little bit about just inspiring you guys. Now, I will be just talking about my own personal story so much in this episode, but hopefully you can just get some takeaways. I always like to premise this with anybody that signs up for our coaching program is that, our job as coaches is to really help our members create sustainable habits, right? Teach them how to eat, teach them how to train, teach them how to hold themselves accountable. You probably heard the phrase, somebody can give you a fish and feed you for a day, or somebody can teach you how to fish and feed you for the rest of your life. Well, that's what we like to do. Now, with that being said, we always like to tell our members as soon as they get signed on, be open-minded, be open-minded. Take everything with a grain of salt, right? And have just your consciousness, right? A different perspective on almost everything. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys a little bit about the spiritual pillar, okay? And most importantly, just a spiritual aspect of my own life, okay? So I grew up in a Christian household, right? Christian school my entire life, and I always knew about God. I always knew about Jesus, right? But knowing about God, knowing about Jesus, and having a personal relationship is 2 different things, okay? So completely 2 different things. Somebody could know, right, like what's good and bad, but yet there's still criminals out there. There's still people that break the law, right? And so I always knew, right, about the stories, but I never actually had my own spiritual walk, so to speak, almost until recently, honestly, where I've just been on this big endeavor, right? This big journey of just learning more about how I can serve, myself better. And when it comes into this spiritual walk, how I can also serve my family better, but also how I can lead better, whether that's for my teammates, right, at Heartletics, whether that's for the members, whatever the case may be. And I understand that, we all have different, religious backgrounds and spiritual sides. So I want you guys to just really get the overall view on what I'm going to be saying in today's episode. I don't want to offend anybody, right? I'm not trying to do that by any means, right? And that's why I always tell somebody, you just got to be open-minded, right? Just listen to what I have to say, because hopefully if you're going through a storm, this might be able to help you out. So the last few episodes, I've been kind of diving into all these different books, right? Grant Cardone, 10X, right? Deep Work, right? Like there's all these different books, and I love learning, right, about just how to become better, right? And I've been, going through this course of just like really trying to develop who I am, becoming the best version of myself, mentally, emotionally, physically, and also spiritually. And I notice here that like whenever I'm not focusing on that spiritual side, I'm not walking by faith, right? I'm kind of doing things by my own end, right? Almost just like living into the life of like the ego, like, oh, I can do this and this is this way and let's do it like this, and not actually just turning to higher source, God, whatever it is that you want to call it, right? Having that faith. That's when I notice that more storms tend to usually occur my way. And so I really wanted to focus, right, on having this foundation. Right? If you think about it, like these 4 pillars of success that I often talk about, right? Your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. If 3 of them are good, but that 4th one is not all the way there, your foundation is not as strong. Your foundation is not as, sturdy as you thought it could be, right? Or thought it once was. So I really want to make sure I'm doing just my aspects, right? And my personal, right, journey of filling up this cup more and more and more. And so the story that I want to bring to you guys is from the book of the Bible. Now, I will gladly say this. I'm not a pastor by any means. I'm on my own spiritual walk. This is something that I've been trying to study the most, right? And dive into different stories and just looking for just a greater aspect of just hope, right? That's all, right? And so the story that I want to kind of go with you guys and share with you is about, Jesus walking on the water. Most of you guys know this story, right? You hear it all the time, whether, you believe in God or not, you believe in Jesus, you believe in the Bible being accurate or not. Like, most people have heard this story before. It's kind of like David and Goliath, right? Like, you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be somebody religious to heard of this story before. Almost everybody knows this story. So with Jesus walking on the water, and this is found in Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33. And remember, I'm not a pastor by any means, so I could be saying something completely left field here and completely inaccurate. Forgive me, right? I'm just letting you guys know, just when I read it and started listening more about it, my takeaways. And hopefully these takeaways can kind of help you out also, because let's face the facts here. Life is always going to test you. Life is always going to push you. Life is always going to throw curveballs your way and storms your way. And hopefully just having some kind of form of faith in whatever it is that you believe in is going to be that light at the end of the tunnel for you. And so, it brings us to Matthew 14, verses 22 through 33. And there's this horrible storm that's out there. All the, Jesus' disciples, they're on the boat. And there's this horrible, horrific storm right in the middle of the water. Like, these waves are bouncing back and forth, etc. And it's, horrendous. But Jesus is out there standing on the water. Okay. And, when Jesus is out there standing on the water, the disciples actually thought he was a ghost at first. They were actually very scared. Like, they didn't know what was going on. But then they realized it was Jesus. And out of all the disciples, Peter decides to, get out of the boat and start walking towards Jesus on water, just like how Jesus was walking on the water. And what happens was, Peter eventually takes his eyes off Jesus and he falls into the water. Okay. And then Jesus grabs his hand, right? And then basically kind of told him about, hey, have your trust, have your faith in me. Don't have that doubt. And this is the story that I kind of want to share with you guys, where I got some biggest takeaways from this. And this has been just kind of helping me out with, once again, just like learning as much as I can to become the best human I can be here on earth, so to speak. Whether that is just sharing love, sharing kindness, sharing compassion, or sharing just some motivation and inspiration for somebody that might be going through life's storm right now. That's all I'm trying to do, is just help out. So some of the takeaways I got from this story is, one, I find it very interesting that, Jesus being all powerful, right? Son of God, he can do anything out there. He didn't take away the storm. He could have snapped his fingers. He could have just cleared out that storm completely, but he didn't, And I think so many times that these storms, maybe it's divorce, maybe it is, you're losing your job, maybe it's your health, right, deteriorating, whatever the case may be, right? Everybody goes through their own storms in life, but oftentimes those storms are used to test us. Faith, right? Remember, it grows just like a muscle. It's got to be tested. It has to be stretched, right? And so I find it very interesting that Jesus did not just snap his fingers and, have the storm just completely go away. He used it to see, okay, like, who's going to step forward? Who is still going to, follow me and keep their eyesight towards me? And so that's the very first interesting thing, is that I firmly believe that, there are storms put into our lives for a reason. And sometimes we don't know those reasons. And sometimes we also don't believe and see the outcome that those storms could actually be a blessing in disguise. Steve Jobs, right? He said it best. He said it, as sometimes you cannot connect the dots looking forward in life. You can only connect the dots looking backwards in life. I said that multiple times on a podcast, just simply because, like, it's about having faith that it's all going to work out in the end. But looking back, you realize here that some of these storms that take you off, the course, and maybe when one door closes, another one opens up, it might actually be a blessing in disguise. So I'm learning that through my own journey. Okay, and so I'm telling you all this just because at the end of the day, hopefully it can inspire you and motivate you when life throws some storms your way, some curveballs that you did not expect to happen. The second thing that I learned from this story is that Peter was walking on the water despite the storms and chaos, being on the waves. He was walking on water perfectly fine until he actually took his eyesight off Jesus. And I feel like that's very, very keen, right? Where how many times do we want something in life? We want to have success. We want to have, this. We want to have this. And these things that we might be going after, I mean, sure, it might be, great, right? It might be things that could actually help people out, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes when we have to be tested, right? I use this also, another analogy where it's just like, think about a little caterpillar. Sometimes they have to go through that metamorphosis, right? That cocoon process to become this beautiful butterfly, right? Sometimes we have to be tested and molded and pushed into becoming that person that we truly want to become. But at the same time, we have to keep our eyes on the prize. Whatever it is that you're after, you have to keep that in the back of your mind. But you also have that firm belief and firm trust and faith that it's all going to work out in the end. It's just like the unshakable confidence within yourself. You need to master that, right? And to master that, it's, hey, when life throws you these storms, keep your eyes on the prize. Peter needed to keep his eyes on Jesus, because when he had doubt, when he looked down at the water and when he, saw the storms around him, that's when he sank. That's when he wasn't walking on the water anymore. And I feel like that's a big hitting gem there, that myself personally, I need to do a better job at, is that oftentimes when life throws me curveballs and storms, and it definitely does. I mentioned this a few times. Being a business owner is not exactly easy by any means. It's very, very stressful. But at the same time, I need to learn how to handle that stress by not trying to do it all by myself and not be, taken off course and, derailed by life's curveballs and life's storms and trying to say, okay, hey, a storm was, came my way. I need to do this. I need to do this to get through this, right? I think it's great to have an action plan, but at the same time, like sometimes though, that storm might be a blessing in disguise once again, where instead you should just have faith, keep your eyes on the prize, keep your eyes on the goal, whatever it is that you're after, have that faith, have that trust. And I think that's what's going to make it a lot stronger, your faith muscle, right, so to speak, because it's showing that when life does throw you these storms, you're not going to get taken off course, right? That's like working out your muscles and you're sore for one day, and so you give up, right? You're like, hey, I'm not working out anymore. It's like, hey, sometimes you got to go through pain. Sometimes you got to go through hell to just get to heaven. So it's just something to just keep in the back of your mind here, that like when you keep your eyes on the prize, and obviously like if you're a believer, hey, keep it to Jesus, keep it to God. Like, have your faith, have your trust in Him that it's all going to work out. And sometimes, once again, when these storms are thrown your way, it might be just a blessing in disguise. Which keeps us to, the last part that I want to talk about. And it's just that these obstacles that life throws us, you never know the future, right? Like we, as human beings, we always want to predict and forecast, right? Like, oh, I want to be here in the next year. I want to be here in the next 5 years. I want to be here in the next 10 years. And that's great. There's nothing wrong out there with having goals. There's nothing wrong out there with having a game plan. I'm not saying to just sit there and be lazy and just like, pray and believe it's all going to work out in the end and you're going to have that dream life. But maybe that dream life is completely different about, where it could be at. Maybe God has something different for you, right? Maybe I'll put myself an example, right? Just in case you don't believe in God or anything like that. So I'll use myself. If let's say in the next 5 years, I want to be, having this, career going on with Heartletics. I want to have this relationships going on with my family. I want to have this going on with just, finances. I want to have this going on with, investments and donations. I want to have this going on with etc. Right? Got it all planned out, a 5-year game plan. And let's say I do some reverse engineering because I recently talked about that. Hey, do this, do this, do this, do this, right? And it's going to set me on course. But what if what I truly want, maybe God has something better for me? And I know that's like hard to kind of concept and grasp, but you never know. I'm obsessed with, TED Talks and listening to different speakers. And like my 5-year plan, hey, maybe I'm doing TED Talks, right? I'm doing some motivational speaking. Somebody might be hitting me up and I'm going to different schools and, doing some inspirational speaking for the kids, whatever the case may be, right? It's something else that is just maybe, God or whatever it is that you believe in has a different plan that's maybe better than what you believe. And I'm only saying this just because at the same time, if we had to put this into fat loss, how many times have you thought you knew what you should have done or should be doing? Maybe it's cutting out carbs, maybe it's intermittent fasting, tons and tons of cardio, but you never got the results that you truly wanted. And maybe that's because what you thought you wanted, that end prize, right? You didn't have the right game plan to, one, lead you up for success, but also two, maybe it's just like it was meant to be where, hey, you had to go through these obstacles, you had to go through these storms almost to realize here that you can't do this all by yourself. You can't have these egos. I often use this as a great analogy with Heartletics, talking about our community groups. You can't go through the battles, right? You got this good wolf, the bad wolf, right? You can't go through the battles of trying to defeat the bad wolf, which is your ego, all by yourself. It's going to be tough because at the end of the day, anybody can do anything when life is easy. Anybody can, cut out their carbs, fasting, whatever the case may be, stick to a diet, stick to a workout regimen. Anybody can do that when life's easy. But what happens when you're sick? What happens when your kids are sick? What happens when, you're stressed out because of your job, stressed out because of, marital issues at home? It's very hard to show up and stay disciplined. But when you have guys in your corner supporting you, helping you every step of the way, holding you accountable, it makes it so much easier. And so what happens is when you do things by yourself, you're all on the island by yourself, right? You're all, and you only know what you know, right? And so it's it might be best to ask for help to get off the island. And with me, right, in my spiritual journey, right, I think for so long I was on the island because I knew about God. I knew about Jesus from everything that, I kind of heard about in school and just, going to church and whatnot. But I wasn't walking the walk, right? I didn't have that one-on-one connection that I should be diving into and making that a big priority in my life. And it's just once you realize here that you can, ask for help and whatever the case may be, right? Asking for help, it kind of relieves you of that burden. It kind of relieves you of that stress, and things start to, hey, that storm starts to die down a little bit. So whether you're somebody that believes in God and Jesus or not, just use this as your own little, put your own little spin on it, right? Be open-minded. Take it as for how it is that you want to see this message as, and you want to see this podcast episode as. I wanted to just, create this for one as a way to hold myself accountable because, hey, the next time I am dealing with a storm, life throws me curveballs, I want to go back to my own podcast and listen to it and say, Joe, what did you say out there to everybody in the world? Okay, cool. Follow through with those steps. Sometimes these storms happen for a reason. You got to keep your eyes on the prize, have that faith, have that trust. It's all going to work out in the end. And realize here too that, hey, sometimes doors close so better ones can actually open up down the road. Nobody wants to just cut out their carbs, see the number on scale go down. Yeah, you lost all that weight, but at the end of the day, is it sustainable? Absolutely not. Right? So it's just you kind of put a little spin on it, however it is that you want. Sometimes you got to, cut out the carbs, realize it wasn't sustainable, regain all that weight right back, just to realize, hey, maybe I should do something sustainable. Maybe I should do something that's best suited for my lifestyle. Maybe I should do something like creating better habits or whatever the case may be, right? Where, once again, Steve Jobs said it best. You can never connect the dots looking forward in life, only connect the dots looking backwards in life. So, with that being said, hey, this has been Coach Joe with the Heartletics podcast. This is an episode for me because I know for a fact when life throws me more storms down the road, and it will, because sometimes, right, you got to be tested. That faith muscle has to be tested and stretched. And sometimes when that happens, hey, you got to keep your eyes on the prize. You got to have faith, and you have to trust and believe it's all going to work out in the end. So hopefully you guys got some inspiration. If you're going through a storm right now or any kind of adversity, I'm sorry to hear that. But once again, hopefully this message could just like help you out and realize here that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. You know, you just have to have that faith. You just have to believe it's all going to work out in the end, and it will. So as always, guys, I'll talk to you next time. Peace out, Girl Scouts.